two persons got into conflict. And because they didn't find ways to resolve the problem, so they decided to go and seek advice from the wise men of the village. So the first one went one evening and told the side of his story to the wise men. After he said the whole story, the wise men respond to him was, "You are absolutely right." The second day, the other one went and also told the side of his story. And after listening to the story, the wise men respond to him by saying, "You are absolutely right." But the wife of the wise man was behind the curtain listening to the conversation from those two men coming to her husband. He was very angry, and she shouted from behind the curtain and to her husband saying, "Hey, old man, two people came to tell you two different stories, and you gave them the same answers. You are absolutely right. That's not right." And he turned to his wife and said, "You are absolutely right." I think in some of our situation in conflict, we don't have the answer. We give the space to those who had created problem to find their own response to the problem. Distinguished guests and participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, Yorana and Nisabula, Minaka in the name of God Almighty, Creator and Sustainer of life. I wish to thank Mr. Larry Thomas, the chairperson of the Pacific Center for Peace Building, and the director, Mrs. Florence Swami, for this invitation to deliver the keynote address to this auspicious gathering. But I would like first also to thank our brothers and sisters from the Interfaith Fiji, and especially to our choir, to whom I belong to that choir. And this choir is also performing on the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th through a show that PCC is setting up on the theme Rebirth, Our Mother's Earth Call for Reconciliation. So if you're interested, just call the PCC office for tickets. It's only $10. Also, my humble apologies for my Tahitian French English accent, because this is my third language, so I'm not really good in English, but I try to do my best. That's why I put up on the screen so that you can follow the idea. In this presentation, I wish to do 4 things. First, to briefly say something about 2 significant change dynamics, one in general terms and the other specific to peace negotiations. Second, to share my own experiences on peace building. Third, to put forward some challenges in the implementation of Human Securities Council Resolution 1325 in the context of the Pacific. And fourth, the stand of the Pacific Conference of Churches for Peace. But before that, I want to share with you 13 sacred texts on the Golden Rule across the world religions. Can you forward, please? The first slide. Second. Yeah, from the native spirituality, we are as much alive as we keep the earth alive. From Jainism, one should treat all creatures in the world as one would like to be treated. From Judaism, What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. Go and learn it. From Zoroastrianism, do not do unto others whatever is injurious to you, to yourself. Buddhism, treat not others in ways that you yourself will find hurtful. Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what will cause pain if done to you. Next. Baha'i faith, lay not on any soul a load that you will not wish to be laid upon you, and desire not for anyone the things you will not desire for yourself. Christianity, in everything, do to others as you will have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Sikhism, I am a stranger to no one, and no one is a stranger to me. Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. Unitarianism, we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Confucianism, one word which sums up the basis of all good conduct, loving kindness. Do not do to others what you do not want done to you, to yourself. And Islam, not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. This is just to say there is peace when there is mutual respect. Let's come to the first point of this presentation, the change dynamics. First, one of the interesting ironies that I find in our so-called modern times is that as, can you scroll down, please? Is that as our technological powers grow the frequency of violent conflicts and wars, not only increases, but also happen indiscriminately, that violent conflicts and acts of terror are increasingly invisible with no apparent reason and targets anybody or anything. For the most part of the last decade, we had a set of international moral standards whereby potential conflicts and wars were assessed or reviewed against. However, since the close of the last century, and especially at the beginning of this decade when the September 11 attacks in the US and the latest invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq without the UN Secretary Council's mandate, these standards are becoming irrelevant. If moral standards of ignore, share values that holds a community together also falls by the wayside. But what it does is to make us less sure of our moral convictions, less certain of our beliefs, and as a consequence, threatens our sense of continuity of our shared values. Fiji is a good example, where constitutions were thrown out, reviewed, and reinstated, yet hotly contested to this day. As a result, Fiji's shared values are hanging by a thin thread. But this is not the only factor to our sense of discontinuity of shared values. Most of us will acknowledge that change is happening at a rate that we could ever imagine. What is most disconcerting is the sense that change is running far ahead of our ability to map out a shared future, leaving us deeply vulnerable and uncertain. Imagine being caught on a piece of land between two streams of rising flood waters on either side. Most of us will know how it feels, the sense of terror and anxiety, to be in such a situation. The very human response in such a situation is to revert to what is familiar, what is certain, and to known boundaries. Hence, you will find that religious and/or cultural sensibilities are often invoked violently in some instances, as in the case of Fiji in 1987 and 2000. These were compelling and clear-cut and not in doubt. Second, and perhaps due to ignorance, we often fail to appreciate that signing peace accords is only one component in peace building. Peace is a paradox. In war, even ordinary people become heroes. Those who show courage in the heat of fighting or celebrating. In the pursuit of peace, even heroes are often afraid to risk. Those who take risk for peace are all too often assassinated, the likes of Gandhi and Martin Luther, or simply forgotten in peace negotiation and peace-building processes, such as the likes of the women of Bougainville, the sister is here, and the Solomon Islands, and the Melanesian Brothers of the Solomon Islands, and many women's groups here in Fiji. Agreeing to end hostilities and pursue peace may seem like a betrayal. This is because pursuing peace has none of the purities and clarity of war, in which self-defense, national honor, patriotism, and pride are unambiguous and compelling. Wars and conflict speaks to our most fundamental sense of identity. There is an us, and there is a them, and there is no possibility of confusing the two. However, when warring sides sign a peace agreement and shake hands over it, who is now the us, and who is now the them? Making peace, therefore, involves a profound crisis of identity. The familiar and known boundaries of friends and foes must now be redrawn. This period is what some call the post-conflict phase, but which, in my opinion, is inadequate. This is because the definition seems to talk mostly about the reconstruction of state mechanism and addressing vague nation-building issues. Yet it is so important to understand the change dynamic involved, because understanding it will lead to developing sustainable strategies to support the symbolism and hopes of peace agreements. Most peace agreements soon fell apart after being signed because the change dynamic was not understood or simply ignored. This is where reconciliation, and in particular the essential element of truth-telling, is so crucial. It is nice to ask for forgiveness and to reconcile, but to action the implication is quite another matter. This is because in doing so we have to redraw our identity boundaries. For most of us, this is one of the hardest things to do. Strategies for peace building. In my own country, Maui Nui, under the nickname French Polynesia. You may disagree with me, but this is how we call ourselves. We try to address the two change dynamics mentioned above in our pursuit of our self-determination. Our focus, among others, is on two things in our peace-building work. First, to provide an avenue for storytelling, which is essential to reaffirming shared values. In most cases, the stories, although painful and deeply confused at the time, did two things. One, the stories not only reaffirm each person's ethnic identity, but also reaffirm the values they all share. The experience helped them to begin to see the real possibilities of a shared future. Two, explore together what their shared values imply to deeply held beliefs and attitudes, present relationships, and understanding of the other. In other words, these helped our people in some small way to see that redrawing identity boundaries, although painful, opens up exciting possibilities. Rituals and symbols were also important aspects of the process. This is because symbols and rituals express the stories in a way that grips the hearts and imagination of people. Second, to provide a safe space for people to tell the truth about themselves in relation to how they saw and experienced colonialism. These are crucial questions to explore. But in order to do this, people needed to feel safe and secure enough to tell the story and trust that what they say, others in the group will listen with understanding, as much as they will when others tell their stories. Crucial in making the space safe are the skills and experience of the facilitators to enable participants to trust themselves and others to tell their truths. Providing a clear process, a safe space, and skilled and experienced facilitators is a responsibility required from those involved in peace-building work, in the hope that people will respond with their stories of the truth. For this reason, reconciliation cannot be rushed, but can only be encouraged with such focused activities, clear processes, and skillful facilitators. The failure of peace processes, in my opinion, is the lack of appreciation on the part of the planners to understand the change dynamics. As a consequence, truth-telling is confused with the legal process. Forgiveness is confused with reconciliation, and activities tend to be short-term and frivolous, giving the impression that reconciliation is superficial, unfocused, and the process muddled, which unfortunately has been the experience of many people. Moreover, government sees no need to invest in training people to undertake the task of facilitation, which shows its lack of real concern over the importance of reconciliation to the country. The UN Council Resolution 1325 and the implementation challenge. There are 5 focuses on the UN Security Council's resolution 1325. These are participation of women in decision-making in peace processes, gender perspectives in training and peacekeeping, the protection of women during armed conflict, gender mainstreaming in UN reporting systems, and programmatic implementation mechanism. Other important supporting documents include CEDAW, ICED, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and various ILO conventions. One of the hopes of Resolution 1325 is that we become sensitive and committed to incorporating a gender perspective in the work we do as organizations. It serves two purposes. One, as preventative mechanism, and two, a guide to how we deal productively with conflict. These are important considerations not only in peace-building work, but also in other areas. However, in the context of the Pacific, the involvement of women and youth in peace negotiation processes and peace-building work is fraught with cultural and religious subtext, which may make the implementation of Resolution 1325 much more difficult. At best, their involvement, sad to say, is limited to value education in the home and among their peers. While this is necessary, it is disconnected from the political processes and hence perceived as marginal. The issue regarding the implementation of Resolution 3025, however, is not about its relevancy in the Pacific context, but rather it is a thin morality. Such resolution can be agreed around a negotiating table, but unless it grows in the hearts of ordinary women and men, it will not last. If this happens, when will we have a situation whereby development focuses keep changing all the time? For example, the UNDP, from poverty alleviation to sustainable development, to good governance, and now back to sustainable development, UN sustainable goals. And only God knows what will be next. What I mean by saying that Resolution 1325 is a thin morality is that it does not have the accompanying rituals, symbols, and sacred texts. Because of that, it does not grip the hearts of people as a Yangona ceremony in Fiji, Samoa, or Tonga would, for example. But as a concept, Resolution 1325 has value. In the Pacific context, where many of our societies are heavily laden with thick moralities, rich in rituals, symbols, and sacred texts, implementing Resolution 1325 will require a great deal of imagination, innovation, initiative, and courage. One of the challenges, therefore, for the planners and implementers of Resolution 1325 is how to construct rituals, symbols, and sacred texts out from the resolution's rich history so that its implementation will capture the moral imagination of Pacific people, as well as honor the memory of those whose lives and dignity were cruelly abused and are taken away in violent conflicts and wars around the world and in the Pacific. In honoring this duty to the past and the present, we honor the future. The stand of the Pacific Conference of Churches for Peace. In today's Pacific, the people of West Papua, Maui Nui, Guam, Rapa Nui, and Kanaki yearn for a yet elusive peace. Their minds and souls are in turmoil, oppressed in their own lands by foreign occupiers who plunder their natural resources. These Pacific people cry for the right to determine the future for themselves. At the Pacific Conference of Churches, we work to ensure that the regional and global community hears the voices of our people and acts to see that they are treated justly. For without freedom for these remaining communities, the Pacific cannot say that it is peace. Therefore, we strive for a Pacific in which all people live in peace and harmony, protecting and safeguarding our cultural history, identity, and sustainable future for our children. We also support the Pacific leaders who 16 years ago called for our people to reassert and rediscover our indigenous concept of peace to build a peaceful environment. Extract only those elements of foreign systems and cultures that reinforce peaceful coexistence and human values. Implement peace education as priority subject of all levels. Outlaw and ban all forms of militarization, including standing armies in the Pacific. Address the important issue of socio-economic disparities. Review and reform current system of government and vision for development in the Pacific to suit our needs. Reassert our right to self-determination, our sovereignty, land and control over our resources. Resist the negative effects of globalization. Protect indigenous peoples and others who share the Pacific from militarism, mining, toxic waste, genetically modified organisms, pharmaceutical, and other products. Protect the intellectual property rights of indigenous people. Encourage indigenous peoples developing and implementing alternatives such as the Turana Nation peace model of Vanuatu and the Bougainville people's integrated peace and economic self-reliance system. As we gather this week, it is important to accept that a sustainable regional and global peace is possible through tolerance, love, and respect. In conclusion, great responsibility lays on all our societal institutions, with our religions no less. Religions emerge in this century as a key force in this global age. It can be a source of discord and can also be a form of conflict resolution. We are familiar with the former. The latter is far too little tried. Yet it is here that hope must lay if we are to create a human solidarity strong enough to bear the strains that lie ahead. The great faiths must now become an active force for peace and for the justice and compassion on which peace ultimately depends. This will require greater courage and perhaps something more than courage, a candid admission that more than at any time in the past, we need to search, each faith in its own way, for a way of living with and acknowledging the integrity of those who are not of one faith. When religion is invoked as justification for conflict, religious voices must be raised in protest. Religious voices must withhold the robe of sanctity when religion is sought as a cloak for violence and bloodshed. If religion is enlisted in the cause of war, there must be an equal and contrasting voice in the name of peace. Deep listening to each other is a prerequisite, and we must learn to listen to one another. J. McDonough states in one of his poems, I quote, "In this century and any century, our deepest hope, our most tender prayer is that we learn to listen. May we listen to one another in openness and mercy. May we listen to our own hearts in love and forgiveness. May we listen to God in quietness and awe, and in listening, may we find the wisdom to cooperate with a healing spirit, a divine spirit, who beckons us into peace and community and creativity. We do not ask for a perfect world, but we do ask for a better world. We ask for deep listening," unquote. On this note, let me end with the prayer of the late Archbishop Romero of Salvador. He was gunned down while celebrating Mass in 1980, shortly after delivering a sermon calling upon soldiers to obey God rather than enforce government orders, which violated fundamental human rights. He was an outspoken opponent of social injustice, torture, and assassination. And the title of the prayer is A Future, Not Our Own. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a fraction of the magnificent enterprise that God is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No sets of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water the seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing this. This enables us to do something, and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not builders. Ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future, not our own. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, and I wish this conference a success. God bless.